on parhaimmillaan. Ja tämmöisen perkaaminen on pyhää häväistystä, sillä sisälmyksethän ne on kaikkein herkullisimmat. Siellä on maksat ja munuaiset ja sappi antaa sen semmoisen pikantin, vähän niin kuin pippurin mausteen sille. Ja se on yleensä musta kannattaa suositella, että syö pää edellä, sillä jos syö pyrstö edellä, niin se voi mennä linkkuun tuossa. Pää edellähän kalasäskit ja kaikki on kalan syövät. Vaikka kalasäski kuljettaa pää edellä. Huonoin osa silakassa ja kalassa on tämä mauttomin, tämä selkäpile. Ja herkullisemmat on tietysti juuri pää ja sisukset ja pyrstöt ja evien tyvet, niin kuin muissakin kaloissa. Ja ruodothan ei tunnu missään tämän kokoisessa kalassa.
Onko siinä suolaa kumminkin?
No nyt mä pistin suolaa, mutta kyllä söin mä tuolla verkosta ensin pari kappaletta sellasinaan.
Niin, siinä se oli
kyllä se,
riipimässä ja elävää silakkaa suuhun. Niin.
Joo, kyllä ne sisälmykset on sen verran maukkaat, että muutenhan kala on suhteellisen mieto noin raakana suoraan tai elävänä syötynä. Suola tekee kyllä hyvää.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Longhouse. This time we are taking a deep dive, I suppose, into the philosophy and writings of Finnish. Let me see if I can get this right without looking it up. Ornithologist, writer, fisherman, deep ecologist, Pentti Linkola. Is that correct, Birkarl?
Just about. He preferred to just call himself a fisherman.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Maybe I had some issue with my audio, but there we go. Sorry. We're back. Real quick, before we start this, I'll do some shilling for the channel here. Down in the description should be a link to our Longhouse Clips channel, which we started this week. Luddic has been hard at work uploading some highlights from our channel, from our catalog of now almost 30 episodes of 3 hours. And if you don't have time to listen to our dribble for that long, these clips will give you some fun moments, some deep moments, and some stuff to enjoy in a shorter amount of time. So please check out that if you have the time. There's also going to be a link to my Twitter, our Element or Matrix channel, where you can chat with a number of people who have either been panelists or enjoy the Longhouse, and as well as our Subscribe Star, where you can contribute to the show and help our production value and all that good stuff. Some people in the chat really enjoyed the songs we were playing. Some of these were hymns that Birkarl recommended me that he really enjoyed. I also snuck in a song by Marko Hietala, if I'm saying that correct, who is a former bassist of the Finnish band Nightwish, I think. And let me just adjust our... Here we go. Oh, look here. I also noticed a comment from one J Burden in the chat, and if you don't know who he is, I would really recommend that you go subscribe to him. He also runs a show where he interviews a lot of friends, as it's called, in our spheres. So please check him out if you have the time. Okay, do we just want to get right into it? Do we have any current events we wanted to discuss before we go ahead, or what do you guys think?
Well, I mean, as usual, there's always funny stuff in the newspaper, but I just didn't compile any. So, like, I showed you a couple of screenshots on Telegram earlier this day.
Yeah, we did talk a bit about different things. It was the the article about what to do as a teenager or something if your friends are getting radicalized, if they're starting to notice, if they're starting working out, etc.
Yeah, apparently there's not enough, in terms of a clear protocol of what to do if your friends are getting radicalized. But the Norwegian government are apparently starting courses in democracy. So
luckily, the right-wing publications are here to contain the youth back into the Overton window. There's also the question of the Walrus Freya and the Pride parades, and what are the connection here, Luddic?
Well, like every mother hubber has come out after this walrus was euthanized and talked about how their pet issue is more interesting than basically the walrus, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, if you just look at the header, is it easier to commit to a walrus than homosexual? Yes, big yes. And of course, this is this kind of stupid shit that I get recommended on Facebook in terms of opinion pieces. I just thought it was funny to see that the alphabet mafia is jumping on this and talking about what are you doing? You're wasting your time on this walrus story. You should just spend even more time supporting the LGBTQ brigade, even though Pride is over, basically. Or at least Pride Month is over. I mean, it's always Pride. Pride.
Because
But,
Pride isn't a set date everywhere. Pride is a different date in every town across the country, I think. So
Yes.
there's always Pride going on somewhere.
So no matter how much you're doing, you're not doing enough. That's
Exactly. Why talk about a walrus when you could be talking about homosexuals?
Of course, I mean the article is completely worthless. It's just a standard opinion
I'm just
piece.
gonna keep scrolling. Yeah.
I mean, I'm always sort of. Well, I guess it's no surprise. I mean, we've been around this for so long, but the type of people who are able to get their writing published in these newspapers, it's quite shocking. Particularly, I noticed the amount of women who just get to do opinion pieces about whatever they want. It's really sort of my feels or reels pieces.
Well,
Yeah.
Sorry, it says here, not long after the Pride shooting, it happens again. Now, there was a shooting during, was it Oslo Pride or right before Oslo Pride?
It was during Oslo
gay
Pride.
Bar, yes, in Oslo. One fellow Norwegian national, as they're called, had something against the homosexuals and decided to take it to the streets. But of course, this time it is a walrus being shot at, so it's pretty much the same thing, according to this author. Or something.
Basic values and a human outlook. That's a very relevant header for today.
I was thinking, this article, in a sense, actually would sort of fit into our coverage of Linkola with the whole animal angle, but also the humanist angle, etc., etc. There was the one about the radicalization, but I'm not sure if you want to read that one, Luddic. I suppose it was a bit.
It's very short, and there's more funny articles as well. I got another one recommended. I mean, this has been published on multiple newspapers. This one doesn't have the photo of the author here, but
there was the video.
I just enjoy the Facebook algorithm. I just enjoy logging on there because. Yeah, I mean, I've sort of unsubscribed from every person I think is uninteresting. I've clicked, told the algorithm everything that I want, and they keep giving me stuff like this. They know who I am. They sort of know what opinions I have, and this is what they want me to read. They want me to know that I should care more about the alphabet mafia.
The e-girl has spotted you, Luddic. That's what's happening. The Shodan mother of society, the technological devouring mother.
They keep trying to nudge me. I mean, I linked an article in the private chat there, and it's not. Yeah, this is the radicalization one.
Let me just.
Can you get the translate?
A new one?
Yeah, I put another one in the private chat. We can look at it afterward. Let's see here. I mean, the article is very short. It's just about, okay, well, what do you do if somebody becomes radicalized? And
sure, yeah.
this is put out by, we've talked about the reset previously, but now they're under sort of new management. And,
this is the new management of Reset.
Kinder, gentler.
Talking about, So we're already seeing the effects of containment, and we were talking about like 3 weeks ago or something. That's very funny. It didn't take long. All right. Although most people want to help, very few young people know where to turn if they think someone they know is becoming radicalized. 48.9% answer that they do not know where to turn if they're concerned that someone they know has been radicalized. So let's see here. The study shows that those who had been taught about critical thinking and democratic values at school were less willing to defend the use of violence. Interesting. That's a very interesting study.
It's extremely unspecific. It doesn't go into detail about anything, but this is just a kind of message to certain people. You're just supposed to know what this means. It's not to have a debate. It's just to, okay, we need to school our kids in more of the open society ideology. And so, the last paragraph there is that people are most worried about
obviously, right-wing extremism is the biggest threat to democracy. And we have to...
it's kind of true, actually.
It is.
I hate to sort of say it,
but right-wing extremism is the most dangerous thing to, the regime, as we call it, right? Because that is the enemy of the regime. That is right-wing, quote-unquote, extremists in any form. No matter how extreme you are, really. As long as you disagree with the current state of things, current status quo, you're an extremist, you're an enemy because you want something different.
If you caught me off guard, maybe like 4 years ago when I was more into this kind of like standard counter-jihad, civic nationalism stuff, you'd run the standard line of, well, what about Antifa and what about these, the Blitz, like the black communists, and the real racists, and it's actually the left wing who's the real, danger and whatever. And of course, you get owned in the comment section by somebody posting statistics But it's completely understandable, because these left-wing people, a lot of them are on the government payroll. They get paid money to do their propagandization of young people. So, of course, terrorism is something reserved for the people with the least power. Usually it's like people with who actually have government positions to promote their ideology usually don't have to resort to terrorist acts like this. Yeah. So it's...
and, of course, it is a soft power regime that... is taken up by foxes, as it's called, where they shy away from violence. But usually, what it comes down to is that one day someone's going to have to punch someone else in the face, either physically or metaphorically, right? And I know which side I'm on when that happens, right?
Yeah, of course. We're talking hypothetically, of course.
It's a theoretical
thought experiments.
Yeah.
We have articles like this. I've also read a bunch of articles with boomers coping about Ukraine. That seems to be the Norwegian media have resigned itself to defeat in terms of the Russia-Ukraine situation, where they're seeing that Russia is still advancing in Ukraine, and it seems like they're not able to do a whole lot about it. So they will,
advancing
try to...
slowly, just like the mid-century Germans.
Yes, I don't know if you still have
the Blitzkrieg. Was that?
If you have that comment, because maybe we should censor his face, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you can get it in the snipping tool and just censor out his name and face.
Yeah, if you give me a minute, you can talk about this.
I can see this article as well. So this is something that has been published in multiple newspapers, as well as these types of more pedagogical journals and so on. So it's really a pedagogue whose name is there, Annette Berklund Nielsen. She doesn't have kids, of course, but she's very interested in, how to raise children and so on. And she just makes this giant article about, we shouldn't try to tell kids that, okay, you need to toughen up, basically. You should never, not validate your children's crying. If your children is, sad about something, even if it's very trivial, you should always acknowledge their feelings, because feelings are real. And the argument then is that, well, what would you think if somebody, went up to you and said that, well, you can't be sad because Manchester United lost the latest soccer match because, your feelings are not real or whatever. Like, that's the argument, basically, that you should, you treat adults with respect. So you should treat children with the same kind of respect. And of course, this I'm reading in the comment sections, and like this apparently has wide support, especially around women. And it just reminds me of like the limitations of having, a female-dominated space with raising children. Not that women shouldn't raise children, but you should have some masculinity.
There's the cutoff point at some age where the father should, start teaching the kid about the world. Telling him that, you know what, actually that drawing isn't good enough to put on the fridge anymore. You can't. But you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, the crux. The crux of this argument being basically that, what imagine if it was an adult who was crying over something and you'd go and tell them to not cry over it. Well, I would actually double down. Like if you have some,
because you're an adult at some point, you gotta man up, right?
Some adult man who's like not showing up for work, or you're sitting and crying behind the counter of some convenience store because Manchester United lost like 1-0 or something. It's you shouldn't just
I gotta take a personal day because my team lost.
I mean, you shouldn't just be told to suck it up. You should be relentlessly mocked. Like, it should be worse than with the kids. You should just be made fun of and ostracized for and bullied for for crying about stuff like this as an adult. I mean, there comes a point where you can sort of choose whether you want to be a kind of like high agency person who's focused on stuff outside of yourself, or if you want to be like this kind of Seinfeld, 90s person who's only interested in their kind of inner world. This is eternal navel gazing thinking. That's basically what's promoted here, right? I mean, it is the usual thing. There's no studies. There's no.
It's kind of like this one is pretty much the sort of it's the symptom of the increased female-brained side of our society, or how like feminized our society has become, I suppose.
Yes, and it goes completely unchecked. And I mean, some people have talked about that. I mean, there's sort of enough misogyny online. And I kind of agree, but this still has to be pointed out that it's this just goes way overboard. I mean, the children of course, there's gradations to this stuff, but the idea that you can have a kid who starts crying about something trivial and then not acknowledging it or just telling them to suck it up, it's completely valid in my view. I really want to do an episode on pedagogy in the future and talk about stuff like child raising practices over time and corporal punishment and these different trends about what was popular in the past and what's popular now. I think that might be a very interesting topic to delve into, and actually more taboo.
I think we should look into that because there is a certain, the weight is too tipped to one side these days, and we don't really know or we're starting to see the outcome of that. I mean, I think it's not like we're saying that only women or only men should raise kids, but the father is certainly, for a multitude of reasons, which we probably don't have time to go into here right now, is more and more out of the picture when it comes to raising the child. And I've always joked that among my friends growing up when I was a teen, I always joked that, I was one of those weirdos who came from a stable home, right? Because my parents weren't divorced, my dad was the majority breadwinner, etc., right? It was very stereotypical in that sense. But usually a lot of your friends end up not being that, right? And and that gives you a lot of insight into their family lives. And then my go-to joke was, well, I actually quite like my parents. Even though my dad can be strict sometimes, right?
To reiterate, because I think this is, it says you want to talk about something like corporal punishment. I mean, we talk about the sort of taboos of the right wing and things that you don't want to say, and there's certain words you don't want to use. But I honestly think like this is like a deeper kind of taboo topic than almost anything I can think of. Like, imagine like you're going in as a political party or in at some meeting and you want to talk about reinstating corporal punishment. Like, I can't imagine anything that would be met with a kind of harsher reaction.
So you'd have guy from the Progress Party a couple of years back that wanted to do something with people with Down syndrome. he got it pretty bad. He was hinting on that stuff. Yeah.
But of course, this is
Anyway.
something that has to do with gradations. Just to make the final point there, that the consequences of that stuff, because like the boomers in general, like in the developed world, were the first generation that grew up with a blanket ban in most countries on corporal punishment. That's very interesting. I mean, you want to talk about stuff that formed the boomer psychology. I actually think that the blanket ban on corporal punishment in a lot of these countries, that was done undemocratically in most places, just like most of these progressive legislations have been. And it's something that I can find very little history on it, so I'll have to do some serious digging if I'm going to do a presentation on it. But sorry, I didn't mean to ramble on.
One final thing about this article is that this is posted in the kindergarten workers sort of newspaper. So this sort of reflects a bit of the what happens in Norway if you send your kids to kindergarten. So just as a heads up to any Norwegians
it's
listening,
something you absolutely want to do is look at like teachers' journals and kindergarten journals and stuff like that, instead of like reading just a regular newspaper for adults, quote unquote. You read what's being discussed in these newspapers where they talk about school, elementary school, kindergarten, and so on, and see what's actually on the agenda for them.
Yeah, precisely, because that's where a lot of the power and the NGOs and all of that is actually seated. It doesn't make the major headlines. It's very insidious in that sense. I think that's enough current events for now.
Well,
what you say?
I think,
Don't you think?
one last thing would be my complete vindication on my assessment of Sanna Marin. That is showcased on the new Longhouse Clips channel. That original clip was from this year. I think it was March or April. And if anyone has been following current news, international acclaim that Sanna Marin has got, I think I'm gonna take a point here.
I forgot about it. I mean, I'm so tired these days because of the because of all the work with Luddic Jr. But if I had my regular rested brain, I would have just given you like the W on this one immediately. I was thinking about it before we came the stream.
It's not even a vindication. It's just you were right all along, Luddic. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago as well, because I did like a second deep dive and came to the same conclusion. And you told me in the Longhouse Matrix channel. Well, what did I say? I told you in the stream. She's would you call her a bar thought?
Yeah, local bar thought.
And this has just been, reinforced in the couple of weeks. God damn it! But she's a strong, independent woman who doesn't need any government. She can just party, and Finland keeps chugging along. Apparently.
Yeah, I think the Twitter account Fisted by Foucault had the best take on where these countries, they're not serious things, and they have a regional social media manager at the head of them.
He seems to have been banned, I think.
No, I think it's the one on top there.
Yeah, it's the one on top right there.
Oh, it's a Substack. Okay,
yeah.
There he is. Yeah. He probably. I seem to remember. Yeah, reading something about how countries no longer have leaders; they have social media managers. You're right. That's a good take. Okay, let's see. People in the chat making comments on what we're talking about, but Wisconsin Nationalist says that most women, American women, can't be trusted with a dog, let alone a child. That's a white girl bleeps dogs reference. I think it's time that we take a look at our boy Linkola here.
Absolutely.
Let's see.
Now, before we begin, I just want to say a disclaimer on behalf of the Longhouse that anything unlawful that may be stated during the stream, we do not advocate.
Thank you. This is purely the views of Linkola himself, nothing else.
Yes, and he has passed away in the year 2020. and we will simply state what he believed.
That's a good hedge. Thank you.
Carlo Pentti Linkola was born in 1932 in Helsinki, the capital of Finland. And 32, that was pre-war. He was a child during the war. And that may have had it was not a time of plenty, as they say. He was the son of Carlo Linkola, who was the rector of Helsinki University and a professor of botany. So immediately there you can say he is not your common man, since his father was leading the largest university in the country. Now his father, Carlo Linkola, was an instrumental part of establishing various kinds of laws in Finland, as well as an expert. And the national park laws and all kinds of other initial environmental regulations of the newly independent Finnish state were in large part due to his consultation. He also founded the Finnish Association for Nature Conservation and was the first chairman.
He was the first chairman. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
His father, Carlo Linkola, Pentti's father. And on his father's side, the family was of old Kronofogde. I probably butchered that Swedish. Well, basically in English, it's bailiff or magistrate. And these bailiffs or magistrates often came from old Finnic tribal chieftains and such.
So it's kind of an old sort of thane title that got shuffled around into a statesman.
In the Swedish Empire, kingdom and an empire, and yeah.
Yep.
And a branch of the family had been ennobled or knighted by Tsar Alexander II during Russian rule, and with the name von Kollan, because and as an ominous note, the family motto of the von Kollan in French, as is common with the Russian Empire, was I'll attempt this here. Fais ce que doit, advienne que pourra.
Very nice. I applaud your French. I don't speak French. I'm sorry.
Merci.
I'm better on the Spanish and Italian.
And that means do what you must, come what may.
Right.
Quite ominous.
Well, it's also a little bit of a, sort of seems almost Christianity-inspired line.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
That too. His mother's side of the family can trace lineage straight back to the Swedish noble house of Nattodag, the number 13 in the Swedish nobility, and it's the oldest continuous Swedish noble house that is still alive today.
And Nattodag in English meaning night and day, literally.
Yes. Some other background. Oswald Spengler visited his mother's family when she was yet living with her parents as a young woman, and she served him coffee.
Oh, this is deep lore. I didn't know this.
And
that's very good.
His maternal great-uncle, Eino Suolahti, so his mother's uncle, went fishing with Himmler in 1942 during the Second World War. So overall, with this kind of background, you get the idea that this is not a common man. And although he presented as very common due to later political situations in Finland, this should pretty much establish that where his later elitist tendencies came from.
Yeah, certainly. His background here says that, even with his dad being of a university, this is a university 100 years ago, not a university of today, and then having these connections to ancient nobility, it's clear that he'd
well,
have
not
some.
Just a university; it's the university in the nation.
Well, sure. I was talking a bit generally.
Yeah.
Monophthalmos asks, I'm not sure if he needs it for anything, but he asks, do you have a printed reference for the Spengler story?
Well, I do have a book on my shelf. Otherwise,
do you have the name
really.
of the book?
Sure.
Just in case
it's a Linkolan perintö by various authors. It's a collection.
So Monophthalmos, like with most else with Linkola, you're going to have to learn Finnish. Yes.
There's nothing in English.
The Great Barrier, and as you told me before the stream, it's probably the way he would have wanted.
Exactly. I mentioned this in the pre-stream that honestly, by making this collection of information and presenting it today, I'm very much working against Linkola's wishes himself. He didn't want any translations, really.
Right.
And any international acclaim or anything like that. However, the home he lived in most of his childhood in Helsinki was an apartment made out of a gigantic stone building in the center of the city that was planned to be used as a royal palace for a potential King Frederick Charles of Finland during 1918, but that monarchy project fell through, and the building was made into apartments and sold off, and the Linkola family lived there. And as a special anecdote, from inside the fences in the garden, he had a perfect vantage point to pelt factory workers on the way to work with snowballs. So
that's what he did during his commute. Yeah. Nice.
Well, as a little kid.
Well, yes, of course.
Yeah.
So. Now, hang on a moment. This what was his name? King Frederick Charles. He was the brother of Wilhelm II?
No, he was the brother-in-law of German Emperor.
Brother-in-law, okay.
Of the German Emperor Wilhelm II, and he was well, in German, Friedrich Karl Ludwig Konstantin Prinz und Landgraf von Hessen-Kassel.
Okay.
So,
very nice. Old European names, that's good.
Yes.
It was just a point I seem to stumble across. For those of you interested in history, there's a connection there. Sorry, keep going.
Sure. So, for most of his childhood, he lived in the city like this, but during the off time from school and every other chance he could get, really, he was spent summers at the family farm in Kantahäme, Tavastia, yes. And over there, he wound up living in that vicinity for most of his life, although he did of course travel all across the country on various activities that he got into later. But while there, he learned a lot of practical skills, like riding a horse, fishing, woodworking, all kinds of stuff that he fell in love with, really, and he really grew a disdain for the city in general. And he attests to this in multiple interviews in later life. His father, Pentti Linkola's father, died when he was 10, but his mother lived for another 60 years after that.
That's quite a long time to outlive your spouse. Wow.
Yes, I think it was his father's second marriage, and
okay.
And it was quite an age gap, so yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And his first trip abroad was at 17 years old, and he visited Frankfurt in Germany in 1947. And what he saw there was, of course, a city in ruins, as you might imagine.
After the Second World War, yes.
Yes, and the other notable thing he saw there were the recently local fauna called Americans. And he saw them riding around in
the invasive species of Americans, yes.
Riding around the city in their jeeps like they owned the place, which they did. And with their helmet straps, open all the time and chewing this bourgeois thing called gum. What is this?
Right.
He grew a deep hatred for America and talked about American culture with complete disdain for the rest of his life, really. Now, Pentti Linkola was, of course, not a superb student, but pretty good regardless. And he did enroll at university to become a biology teacher and maybe a professor like his father. But he quit after the first year, owing to this tendency to dislike the city and everything with it. And he decided to want to live this idyllic life that many of us also do, out in the country, fishing and all that good stuff.
Trying to live more off the land, yes.
Yes. So now, before we actually jump into his adult life, I wanted to...
Do you know how old is he when he quits the university? Do you know that?
Yeah. Basically, in Finland, the same system back then as now is you have lukio or gymnasium. Swedes and others Nordics might know gymnasium. It's basically high school for Americans. And after that, you go to university.
Mm-hmm.
If you get to university.
Okay, so it was maybe like 19, 20.
Yeah, he was about 19 or 20.
Yeah.
And before we jump into his life's work in writings, books, articles, political activists, and living the aesthetic vision he preached, I wanted to have a discussion more on the theoretical level about ecology and deep ecology, because his main titles in life, although he himself called himself only a fisherman, humbly, it was a deep ecologist. And the word ecology was coined by German biologist Ernst Haeckel in 1866.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in the intellectual tradition of Darwinism.
Yes.
And Haeckel was a very cited individual in mid-century German propaganda with his Darwinistic and social Darwinistic takes on a lot of things in life. And from deep ecology meaning basically just a study of nature in more neutrally. But when we get to deep ecology, there's a lot of Wikipedia entries on what the definition is, but I like to fashion my own definition that I hope will catch on. And it would be deep ecology views anthropocentrism, so a human-centric worldview, as an ontological error. The natural world is valuable regardless of human judgment.
I see. Well, I mean, you did mention and deep ecology. I do have a bit of connection to through the Norwegian philosopher Arne Næss, who I suppose did he coin the term deep ecology?
Yes, he coined it.
Back in the 70s or something. And that certainly fits your definition here, where the key point is nature comes before the human, which is something that has been discussed a bit on the right from time to time, where the Christians have a tendency to view it as a depending on which branch, I think you're either the master of nature or you work along with nature. And pagans seems to worship it a bit more than Christians on the right.
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
I think pagans do have more of this standard mainstream symbiosis with nature view.
Yeah.
Although deep ecology in the mainstream, I've called it egalitarian, as in humans and nature are just as valuable.
Mm-hmm. I will say that after our stream on the selfish gene, egalitating humans and animals within a Darwinistic framework seems to be a bit dangerous. Do you have any comment, Luddic? We did touch a bit about that a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that it was Arne Næss that coined the term deep ecology. That's pretty interesting. Although the way I see that deep ecology, I mean, Birkarl had a perfectly sound definition of it. Commenting on it, I mean, the way that sort of deep ecology separates itself from the kind of past environmentalism that you typically encounter in other academic circles, like say with someone like Peter Singer. I mean, we could bring that back to the Sam Harris stream again, because they look at, you know, nature and the environment and the value of it, but it's very much connected to utilitarianism and, in a sense, kind of like harm reduction and pleasure, sort of pleasure maximization within the context of a larger sphere of a circle of concern, or a sort of sphere, not a sphere of influence, but a circle of concern. That sort of okay, we're going to do this, basically harm reduction with as many living creatures in mind as possible. But with deep ecology, I mean, it's really nature has value onto itself as itself, axiomatically. There's no need to kind of justify it any further. Nature doesn't have to justify itself. It is valuable within itself.
Everything the human does within it is an attack on nature. That's the important second point, I think.
Yeah, I think if you take it as far as someone like Linkola as well, you basically see.
There's also the more egalitarian strain that comes in the tradition of Næss and some German future deep ecologists during the Cold War, where they take it in a much more egalitarian and, you know, this sort of left anarchist direction.
Certainly,
where this there needs to be this symbiosis. You know, you can, if you just imagine this, how the aliens from the movie Avatar live, basically.
Yeah.
This fantasy land.
Which is how you end up somehow with nuclear power plants being bad because of nature.
You're talking about the German sort of environmental, what is it?
Yeah.
The Green Party or something?
Yeah.
I don't know if they're like a deep ecology
also eat
party.
the bugs because of the environment.
But I mean, that's very much tied in with this kind of utilitarian technocratic environmentalism,
of course, yes.
And not so much with that. I mean, they're basically just they want to maintain society and civilization at scale, while still, you know, optimizing or reducing harm to nature.
Yeah, they want to have their cake and eat it too, and you get quality, you know,
like stuff in Norway with like you build the bridges out of wood and they last for 10 years before they break. It's kind of like they're trying to create this sort of modern Fred Flintstone type civilization. But
and then you get into a whole like Malthusian wormhole, I suppose. But I think you have something about that coming up as well, Birkarl. How about we keep going here? Is there anything more you want to?
Yes. So, in contrast to the egalitarian deep ecology, I propose it's not official, but I propose a reactionary deep ecology, where I've developed this definition of nature comes first, and if there is still room for humans afterwards, then some humans are fit for life.
But only as long as nature is thriving. Is that the caveat here?
As long as nature is sustainable, as they say.
I see, yep. So that is a much more sort of hunter-gatherer, small-scale, maybe a tiny bit of farming type of idea. Is that it?
Yes, you could say that. I think I wanted to save it for the conclusion, but that sort of feudal or idleware is part of Linkola's ideal vision. But let's get into that. So Linkola, during his life, he wrote various books on birds, fish, wildlife, plant life, mostly as a younger man, in his 20s, 30s. And his greatest legacy is the Great Book of Birds with Olavi Hildén, written in 1955. And these big tomes of ornithology are one of the most valuable resources on birds of the Eurasian landmass that there exists, really. And he as an academic, of course, never really went to university. What do you do in your first year, really? But he did contribute to this sort of work.
As it should be done. That's based AF, by the way. It's something, I know it's like rose tinted glasses, but I do kind of miss the quote unquote golden age of science where a lot of the work was done by, you have to go outside and record stuff and do things and see what happens. Now you just, circle jerk around writing papers where you cite each other until you write what the regime wants you to write.
Definitely. He spent most of his younger years biking around all over Finland, putting tracking rings on birds, mostly.
Nice.
But as regards his intellectual work, he focused mainly on articles in magazines, and all besides one of his published so-called books are collections of essays published in various magazines. The biggest ones in Finland being Suomen Kuvalehti, but most of them were published in specific deep ecologist magazines that didn't have a huge spread, but were quite influential in their specific niches. And one of these magazines the most influential was Elonkehä, which literally means cycle of life.
Right.
And I have this quote from him here that says, books are a waste of paper. They mostly rot in warehouses when they could have remained as trees.
Very nice. I love it. Extremism in all its forms is beautiful. But I do understand what he's saying. It's the, it's not that you have a journal in your home, it's that the mass production of books is basically destroying forests.
Yeah.
I can see the argument here.
We're going to return to that topic many times here. And his style of writing always attacked on ethos, mostly in emotion, and he always went for the doom and gloom, really trying to scare people into compliance through pessimism, and often in his later more depressive phases, even self-pity about how could we have done this to ourselves. And it gets quite odd reading him, honestly. Sometimes he gets, as is the stereotype, the suicidal man in the middle of the forest writing his books.
I was gonna say, there, I don't know if you've read, is there any, can you draw any lines to sort of how Carlyle writes some of his stuff? I remember looking into him after they did the Carlyle day.
Carlyle has much more energy, thunder, vitalism.
Okay, so this is a lot more pessimistic, is what you're saying.
This is a style of terminal decline.
Right.
Calm, stoic, solemn.
So then it might be more Spengler then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Linkola,
my question is then: is this written sort of to be prosaic or to be poetic, or does it just sound more kind of schizophrenic or sort of uncomfortable?
Well, it sounds, his later writings mostly get schizophrenic in the middle, where he has a change in his one fundamental opinion, but it does in the end stay logically consistent with the axioms he has. So it's not schizophrenic in that sense, but it does have some contradictions, and he does just brush over them, because his life's work was not about the intellectualism. It was working for nature.
Right.
So his first published work was Isänmaan ja ihmisen puolesta, mutta ei ketään vastaan. So for the fatherland and for humanity, but not against anyone, 1960. It was written as a pamphlet, and on the cover it had a big background of Finnish nature and a Finnish flag. But what the inside of the book was basically a manifesto of pacifism. The main topic of the book, especially with the not against anyone part, Soviet Union, is just about pacifism and how warfare and humans killing humans is bad. He did not yet step into the phase of being this reactionary deep ecologist. He was very much still in the completely leftist frame of egalitarian, human-centric deep ecology, where nature is beautiful and humans cherishing nature is beautiful.
Well, I think we can forgive him for being a lefty when he was young. I think that's something a lot of people probably recognize in themselves.
He was 32 when he published this book.
Okay, that maybe he's on the line here. he's gotta start moving soon, I guess.
One of the criticisms he got was that he actually did complete his armed service, and he got to the rank of sergeant, I think. So he didn't, he was. So he didn't, live out his pacifism as an 18-year-old, but he just hand waved it away with the idea that I went to the army to go camping and stuff. Yeah,
nice.
Nice save. It's pretty good.
I just did it to hang out with the boys. Yeah,
in the forest. So, other essays from this era are a recurring theme of crying about oil and oil use, and especially the concept of peak oil. He constantly, and not just oil, but all resources. This is a theme he never in his life let go of, that resources must come to an end. Now, I'll get to at the end where I think he's wrong, but sort of right accidentally in spirit and in intention, but we'll come back to that.
I'll put a pin in it because I have some thoughts too. So
yeah, but one of the more interesting essays he wrote during these years was his state program for use of waterfront by humans, and a personal cottages on the side in this essay. And basically the state program for the use of waterfront by humans was this idea that there should be a public ministry that employs people to take care of all lakes, rivers, and wetlands in Finland. That's the whole country is basically a frozen swamp, so that's like 90% of the country. And people should not be let near them to defile them. And should anyone want to visit lakeside, for example, to go rowing out on the lake or something, they should 2 months in advance file with the ministry for a permit to do so. All building near I think it was 100 meters near to a waterfront would be banned, and this would protect all sorts of wildlife, mostly birds, since birds were his main focus during these years.
What's interesting is I just started thinking about, there is an article from Knut Hamsun where he writes probably about 100 years before Linkola about how the future of Norway is in upheaving the marshlands or the swamplands of the north and turning it all into farmland, which is pretty much the opposite of what he wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. Linkola would have none of that. And another theme that he threw out there during this time was the idea of a municipal fisherman. It's sort of like a lord's huntsman, in that your municipality or city, well, I guess not a city. Linkola would never have endorsed a concept such as cities.
Sure, but the fiefdom or
the town,
yeah.
There should be the fisherman designated for each, and they would be allowed to go to the lakeside responsibly. Of course, they would be trained.
It's a bit like the old forest rangers and the British lord hunting grounds, etc. Is that what he's getting at? Where you have sort of power sanctioned hunters and people who make sure there aren't any poachers and.
Yeah, exactly. Like, just a standard medieval lord's huntsman.
Yeah.
Instead, it's a municipal fisherman, and it had to be this way because, well, it was a republic under the Soviet Union, basically. So you can directly advocate feudal things, but from these sorts of proposals, we can see immediately how the more pure leftists might immediately say, the state claiming what I can do with beautiful nature, this is fascism. And this sort of attack, though it was felt as odd towards him, it rattled him at first, and he really felt the accusation at first.
Right. So wait, was he called a fascist?
Yes, he was called an eco-fascist for the first time for this personal cottage and
because he wanted to. Yeah.
Oh, and I didn't get to the personal cottages. So I mentioned the no building 100 meters of the shore. Yep. That would be demolishing all personal cottages and
all boat houses, etc.
Yeah, and he especially disdained the working class, or every single person of the middle class having these, tiny little huts all over
the
damn lakesides. He said that, one magistrate having his one gigantic villa in one place in the in the whole region wasn't that much of a problem. But if every single damn factory worker had his little cottage on the lakeside, it's completely
in total
despoiled.
Takes up a lot more real estate. Yeah, I can see the argument. Yeah.
And this is where, the accusations of elitism also come in.
Just a practical question that I just thought of. If I'm going to then file a form to the government 2 months in advance, if I want to go kayaking, do I get to use paper to file the form?
No, Luddic, it's all digital these days. It's fine. We all know servers don't use any energy or resources.
Oh, right. Okay, so sorry, I forgot. That actually solves the problem. We can just use computers, dummy. I'll use my cell phone, of course. We don't need the paper stuff. But
I think we can say that we truly live in a society, can we?
Internet of Things, 1960.
Yeah. Well, hang on. So what was his idea here? That you basically nationalize the waterfront along the countryside, and then you have to either get approval from a lord or the state to go visit it.
Well,
is that it?
the state. He couldn't advocate the any sort of actual feudalism, but
right. But even though it sounds like that's kind of what he's doing.
Yeah, he's trying to find a backdoor way in a Soviet rule paradigm to bring about these things. It's based because it's control in the hands of the state that is controlled by the Workers' Party, of course.
Sure, yeah, I guess. Speedrunner says, yeah, the middle class is hated by esoteric thinkers of all stripes. That's true, because it's, usually esoteric thinkers are elitists, and it's the old high-low versus middle from, is that Bernet? Juvenel, I think. Bertrand de Juvenel has the high-low versus middle dynamic.
It's not just the high-low versus middle. I think Linkola had an equal disdain for the proletariat.
Sure, yeah.
Say,
But I was talking specifically about usually the esoteric guys hate the middle class, but that's usually because the esoteric guys are elitists. I'm not saying that Linkola specifically is it, but I think a lot of the people Speedrunner is thinking about is. Sorry, carry on.
Yes. So, moving on, in 1971, his essay collection, Unelmat paremmasta maailmasta, so Dreams of a Better World. And
I see.
The basic idea in a lot of these essays is he starts to doubt human nature being able to change. He finally gets out of the idea of starts getting red pilled, as they say, about maybe humans they just destroy nature, and they constantly want more, and nothing is ever enough, and nature just keeps getting destroyed and destroyed and destroyed in billions.
Is he getting like We Are the Virus pilled?
You could say that. He's not there completely in 71 yet, but you could say it's getting there. Some of his pacifism essays were republished here, especially a few against nuclear weapons, which he will come to walk back. And industrial scale warfare, destroying a lot of nature, is of course an easy way for a nation under Soviet rule to advocate for peace, as we saw in the Finland stream, the protesters,
right?
Protesters going for peace and against the warmongering bourgeois West.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, all these essays have this tinge of not being anti-materialist, but he's more for natural nature and the material in nature, and just against all material that is human or for human purposes.
So he's saying that there's a metaphysical value attached to things humans create, and that is worth less than, something made out of a tree. Is that it?
More for things. There's less value in things that humans make to benefit themselves.
Ah, okay, I see.
So he's not anti-materialist because there is more to man than material. He's, just pro-reign of quantity for birds, trees, maggots, everything.
Interesting. Now, I have some notes here from you from earlier in the week, and there's a line here that says that he's pro-Leiden go down. Would you like to elaborate a bit on that?
Yes, so directly in this being pro bird material, he doesn't, every time he sees a factory or a highway or steel mill, anything go up, what goes down is of course the forests and the habitats for birds and animals and everything else. So he doesn't ever advocate against the idea of material benefit bringing more comfort and being good for man. He just wants the quality of life of humans to go down. He thinks the comfort of humans is just bad because what comforts humans is the destruction of nature through the use of resources.
Right.
So he's not anti-line go up because, the line is stupid and doesn't, mean anything in the real world.
Yeah, because I was going to say, that's something that you could say a lot of the dissident right seems to embody these days, that
yes,
you're not negative line, you're screw the line, there's got to be another way.
Generally the position here is, these days with us, is that, the line is a complete abstraction that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Whereas for Linkola, the line just means,
he buys the idea of the line, but says, no, actually it should go down. Yeah, I see.
He wants the line go down. He's pro line go down. And
so he would managerialize less materialism if he could, at least in this state. Is that what we're saying?
Well, he would materialize. He would
set up managerial structures to ensure that the line went down. Is that...
Yes, that people use less resources and live on as little as possible.
The state would grow to ensure less.
This is like dark managerialism or something. It sounds almost like a comic book bad guy type ideology. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny or anything, but just a question. Like, if you say, like, what separates his philosophy from basically just being straight up anti-humanism, because that's kind of what it sounds like to me at this point.
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay, it is just anti-humanism, because I when it comes to nature, I would just be curious if he values some part of nature more than other parts, or that some species are more higher on the hierarchy, should be preserved. Let's say if one species would make another species extinct, would he want to intervene into that, or is that something that can just be allowed to transpire?
He generally advocated against foreign species and invasive species. So he wanted to, for example, exterminate all foreign species extremely aggressively. That would also be something his managerial state would do. But the fundamental problem, I think, is he isn't a normal Darwinist. Also, in the classical sense of the fit survive, he just thinks humans inherently destroy biodiversity, and if humans didn't do this, biodiversity would just either stay the same or continue to grow.
But what is the state that he would be like? This sounds a bit... I mentioned managerialism as a joke, but it feels a bit more like it, because, I mean, how many birds of a certain species needs to exist for him to be happy, right?
A reign of quantity.
Right, yes. Exactly.
But do you think he would be opposed to, say, putting big resources into science, kind of like cloning or manufacturing new species just for the sake of it?
Not cloning, definitely not cloning. But he does later talk about what should exist in this state. He advocates for natural sciences and against stuff like math and languages and this. So people should directly have a connection to understanding what the world is, but fundamentally use that knowledge to just see where humans interfere in this process and completely eliminate that.
Eliminate the human element wherever it's possible.
Yes.
Okay.
Minimize the human footprint.
Right.
So
interesting. Well, I see you told me a week ago or something that the image that maybe a lot of people on the dissident right have of Linkola is probably his later, more Christian-inspired, quote-unquote, based takes.
Well, I wouldn't say Christian-inspired, but...
Oh, okay. But he is a Christian, isn't he?
No.
Oh, he wasn't. Sorry, I must have misunderstood from one of the... I saw an interview of him from what seemed to be a Christian channel where they talked about hymns and stuff like that, so I thought he was a Christian. Sorry.
Yeah, he liked hymns, but he definitely was not a Christian.
Ah, okay, then that makes a lot more sense. My point was, anyway, that maybe a lot of people are more used to his later life takes these days. Yeah.
Yes, we will get to those.
All right, sorry, keep going along your story here. I don't know if you want me to show more images from the years here.
I can talk about this picture right here, since this is his first wife, Alisa, with him fishing here. And he met Alisa when he was 28 and she was 19. And what he saw in her was a strong back to row me while I pull up fishing nets. So that's why he brought her with him to the idyllic getaway out of the city to live with him.
Baby's got back.
Is this a thing? Weird thought for a moment. Because Luddic and I memed a bit about tradwifing the other day in our private chat. But the idea of sort of the old school, more teamworky aspect of a marriage down to this tradwife ideal where, you're just going to run around and bake cookies and not do any work, right? Beside looking after the kids. Is that something that has come from the outside? Because I feel like every time you go back like 50 years in the Nordics, it's a lot more equality in the sense of, here's a bunch of work that needs to be done. I'm going to go carry the heavy stuff. You make clothes and do all of that stuff and row the boat, right? What do you think?
Well, I'm not sure.
This was just completely off the top of my head. I might be way off here. It's just a feeling I have.
As a young man who almost is a Zoomer, not quite. I don't think I'm in a position to talk about this. Although in this picture, as you can see, there are two pairs of oars, though. Both are rowing together here.
Sure, of course. Yeah. I feel like almost the tradwife aesthetic is something that has almost been sold to us by modernity, part of sort of the whole wedding ring, beautiful wedding type of. Whenever I read about marriage from older books, it's especially from the Nordic, it's a much more of a realistic take on two people coming together to sort of build a life together, both physically and mentally.
This should definitely be a stream we do in the future, actually, to look at the kind of Nordic roots of gender egalitarianism and how it kind of contrasts that to other civilizations and how, beauty standards and stuff develops. Like the only thing I can think of that I've seen recently, it was like one of these videos from Andrew Tate, who's now been like banned of every social media platform and stuff. But he's not like
noticing. Sorry.
I mean, he is, he's not really a philosopher, but he has some life experience that's quite interesting. And he talked about, gender equality in like all of these Baltic countries, the Eurovision countries, as I like to refer to them as, where he said that, because of like the temperament of the people in these countries, there's a lot of corruption and a lot of like they think very much in terms of just base, like friend enemy, taking stuff personally, grudging, and so they create these sort of male hierarchies that are sort of almost more like plundering organizations more than they are actual institutions. And there's really no point if you're like a woman to want to participate in that at all. So the best thing to do is then just to try to make yourself look as pretty as you can to pick up a mob boss or something like that. But it is just like the different approach, with the Scandinavian countries. That's, not this kind of modern feminist thing, but more in the idea of just kind of including women in work and having more of a flat kind of inclusive structure.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that the family dynamic is necessarily egalitarian, but the relationship and the dividing of work seems to be different from what seems to be touted as the trad wife of today. And I think Speedrunner maybe said it best, that you're LARPing as last forms of themselves, which is basically you're mashing together sort of Catholic imagery with like 1950s Americanism, and you're making something out of that instead of looking at, what actually worked for your local culture before, right? You're importing basically a view. Interesting.
Yeah,
we'll think about this and maybe do a stream on it. I'm sorry to derail the discussion here. Please continue, Birkarl.
Yeah, this idea of working together, even both also the women working physically, although not maybe the most physically demanding tasks, but physically working together is definitely an aspect that Alisa and Pentti both did. And right here, she's wrapping fish in newspaper that he probably just pulled up from the net from somewhere. So yeah, there's a journalist on a neighboring boat taking the picture.
Nice.
So the next essays that define this era, here we get to more the classically based things. He wrote an essay called On Human Brotherhood.
What year was this?
I can find the specific year. It was published in this essay collection in 1971.
Okay.
But I think it was written some years before, as with all of these. So all of the essays are written, of course, before the essay collection is published. So, for example, the last one was essay collection was published in 2004, but the first essays from it are from 1993, for example. So in this essay on human brotherhood, he talks about how the communist youth invited him to give a talk at their conference, the Finnish communist youth. And he just perused on who would be in attendance at the Finnish gathering of the Finnish communist youth in the late 60s. And he just quipped, and I'll summarize this essay in the sentence that he gave, is what do young working people in Togo, Cuba, and Finland have in common at all? Anything that can be in common with all of these people has to be so abstract that it is of no consequence at all.
Yes, very. I mean, that's globalism, right? You've reduced all of these things to what's the word? A simulacra. It's probably even less than that to be able to sell it across the world, right?
Absolutely. I just had to give one piece of tiny morsel of red meat to the audience, otherwise they were going to tune out from being angry.
They're going to be, who's this leftist? Yeah.
Did he actually hold that speech, or is that something he wrote down? And
that was he wrote it down, and he actually wrote that in the reply and in the essay that he later wrote. So he replied this straight to the communist youth faces. So
interesting.
Yeah. Then a last few topics for this era. He talked about homosexuality and how he disgusted them, how he found them completely disgusting. But since he had his principles, he looked at them and thought about the consequences of homosexuality and decided it was good, since there would be less people breeding and more people dying from diseases.
All right. line goes down. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
It's a human great gay rights slogan.
I'm getting like a Dark Blair with his lightning eyes edit, talking about how, this year we have reduced the cases of monkeypox to 0 by redacted all the homosexuals, so the line has gone down, and he's very happy about that.
less people overall. Yes.
But this is like, this type of image of like this kind of 90s misanthrope person. It's like, I'm not racist, I hate everyone equally, or, oh yeah, personally I hate gays, but they help reduce the population, so they're fine by me, or something. Just
we need another plague, yeah.
It gets better, because next he takes on abortion, which is also, of course, good, because less people born. And this is especially one for the right wingers in that I often found a lot of American, or even sort of especially some Catholics, talking about how Linkola was this reactionary who really showed it to the leftists by talking shit about them, but then I just throw him that he literally advocated abortion until the end of his life, and they shut up pretty quickly.
Right.
Yeah, this guy seems to have like the least popular opinion ever. That I've never heard anybody with like a less working, less popular ideology in my life. Actually,
well, it would be some like meme form of nihilism. But even then, that's usually very personal.
Well,
so
he does have. I wouldn't say there's nihilism, since he does have his ideal vision.
No, I'm saying something that would be as misanthropic as what Luddic said. Like it would be some kind of meme nihilism. What's AA's character? You mentioned like the Gen Daria. Is that it?
Gen X Daria.
Gen X Daria, yes.
But even they leave out some loopholes, right? There's certain things they won't touch.
Well, yeah, because ultimately they love modernity and want to exist in it, right? So they have to leave loopholes. If nothing else, Linkola went balls deep on this, and I can respect that.
He never budged on these two, although I guess he did soften up on actually tolerating gays in his personal life. he never really went for that, but he never really took back these things as he did with the pacifism. He walked that back. And the last essay in this essay collection was mainly about how an eschatological take on how the world is using up all the resources and it's going to end up in a collapse. And to prevent this, there would need to be a transitory dictatorship. And he kind of sells it. I think he starts to actually not believe in this by this era. But at the end of this essay, where he advocates the transitory dictatorship to avoid collapse, he gives a vision of a Rousseauian or Marxist state of nature thing of pure communism. He often used these sort of his purpose wasn't to be an intellectual but an activist for the environment. So he had no problems with just using arguments. Often, I have here on the notes. I have this quip of
what's the fancy word? Is it polemicist? When you're not,
I'm not sure, but
you're just using you're writing basically intended to support positions and shore up or convince people. You're not really writing academically. Yep.
Yeah. I have this mention of people accusing him of being a Malthusian, but I really don't think he actually bought into Malthus's ideas, really. And he was just, he found an intellectual who who said that, collapse is coming, and he said, I'll use that to convince people.
Yes. Real quick here, Bo Gruntman says, how is this not just an off-brand commie, and why am I learning about him? Well, first of all, because a lot of people on the dissident right are interested in him, but also and because I think a lot of
people think that he's not an off-brand commie, and that's kind of my point here.
Yeah. So we'll but he does, I seem to understand that he does get more quote unquote based.
Yeah, well, I don't think he
as he gets older, but
off-brand. I don't actually think he is an off-brand commie. I mean, because he doesn't believe in, this state of nature. He's not an egalitarian actually in any way, because he doesn't even believe in the equality of, humans and nature, or what equality does he even believe in? Nothing.
Right.
So he's not an off-brand communist in any way. This is just anti-humanism.
Yeah. And sure, that, is a part of the managerialism or the communism that is pervasive today. But when you get to later in his life, you'll see that the things he publishes leads very different places than communism.
Yes, definitely. The term eco-fascist is thrown out there, but as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, the purpose of most fascist movements were to, promote human vitalism and, human glory and stuff like this. not be anti-human at all. The purpose of fascism was to save, at least in the fascist's own words, of course, to save humanity from, some perceived left-wing threat. And
but it is also one of the things that slight critique from the right to fascism would be that it puts the individual, or sort of the humanism, sorry, not the individual, the humanism is put in the center instead of a higher virtue, or it focuses too much on the state, or
sure,
things like
and
that.
I guess Linkola has proposes one of these virtues, and most people will not agree with this virtue to be promoted.
All right, let's keep going, because we have gone almost soon 2 hours, and we have a lot left.
Okay. So in 1972, I just had to include this in my going through the secondary literature, and because it summed up a lot of his essays that I haven't mentioned yet. So in a quick take, a journalist affiliated with the National Coalition Party, so the main bourgeois party that I outlined in the Finland stream, and the one that's promoting NATO bases in Finland right now, it described Linkola in the following way in 1972. So Linkola hates cars, which are murder of animals like deer, moose, and rabbit. Humans he didn't really care about. Linkola disliked...
I don't know, a moose can take out a car pretty well if it tries. I've seen it.
that's a bonus. Prussian schooling into factory workers, that's obviously bad, because all factories are bad.
Now that is something where he, I would say, hits a cross-section with the right, and especially the modern dissident right.
Yes.
Because we would argue almost communistically that, factory lines type of schooling is, the reign of quantity type of schooling is inherently bad, I think.
Sure, but the Finnish school system was very much like this, even under the Soviet Union, because of institutional inertia. And I would say it's kind of still to this day, but that's a topic for another time. So Linkola disliked church history and Latin in education, as I mentioned, languages, because these serve no purpose for his vision.
Right. Yeah. Never mind. He's not a Christian. I thought he was because he liked hymns. I'm sorry.
No, he just he liked hymns simply because the music is slow, deliberate, and disciplined.
Well, you can just listen to, like, I played like Nordic chants before the start of the stream. That's the same thing, isn't it?
Well, sure, I guess, but there's less of an cultural. There's more cultural continuity in Linkola's time with church hymns, so that's mostly what he liked. Sibelius was, of course, a favorite.
Right,
also.
Makes sense.
And of course, the next thing, engineers are, of course, the worst thing in existence because they do stuff to nature.
Yep. Makes sense.
And he called journalists subhuman and advocated things to be done to them. Especially, he tiraded about reading in a newspaper about a journalist writing of a 3-penny increase in the price of petrol. And he said, this is the most disgusting misuse of paper that has ever existed. This person should be redacted.
I like how chat has been like dunking on this guy, and then he says that engineers suck and everyone loves him.
Chat truly just presses the cringe and base button.
Right.
His next tirade was against travel agents. Of course, people traveling all over the world uses up resources and is useless. So he advocated, again, redacting travel agents. And the whole concept of socialism and admiring the low and the base and everything that humans instinctively want, which is, well, I guess he had more of a tirade against the whole idea of wanting more constantly, which the working class, in these union strikes and advocating more pay to get more money to spend more and use up more resources, he just completely disgusted this whole cycle. He attacked viciously these capital owning class for setting up the factories, and then he attacked the workers of the factories for
participating.
For participating, yes.
Well, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, and in 1975, his marriage with his first wife, Alisa, ended. And, well, they had 2 daughters, and this is where what the mainstream journalist would call the descent begins. And certainly he has a big shift here. And I have to mention that he was twice institutionalized for depression and these suicidal tendencies.
So he has a bit of a mood about him.
Manic depressive.
This is a bit of, I'm getting Krasinski vibes from this guy.
Sure, we'll get to that in the end as well. Yeah. But the rest of
this photo here, this is a very good photo of him, by the way. I mean, ladies who wouldn't be all over this.
I mean, absolutely. I was just about to get to that. He had this tirade about cars. He, of course, used a horse as is evident. This is nature's worker. So after his divorce, he actually had a lot of different companions, and none of them really stayed for long. And at one point, he did actually have 2 women staying with him, but that didn't really last due to personal chemistry.
Linkola's longhouse, yeah.
Well, I would see him as the head of the household with a pretty. Anyway,
yeah.
his wife commented on this behavior with he would like to have one wife to stay home with the kids and one wife to go out rowing and fishing and stuff, and then a third wife to have intellectual conversations with, and that's his ideal life.
Well, I mean, it's just set up the caliphate, and he can just have his pick, right?
I guess, but yeah, for the rest of his life, Linkola did have an assortment of companions, but none of them stayed for over 5 years, I think. And
interesting.
And a lot of them stayed only for some months, really, because they were, city girls going out to this,
sure.
going out.
Yeah, I mean, they get like lured out by this, this image here, and then they realize, oh, I gotta share a bed here in this like 5 square feet.
And he makes them
cabin.
Dig up potatoes and
yeah.
There is something inherently attractive about like this personality type. I mean, say someone like Jean-Paul Sartre, who was like a really ugly guy. He had a lot of women just for this kind of misanthropic type of guy who is sort of unapproachable. And
yeah, there's something about a guy who goes extremely both ways. That draws. It's sort of like an adventurer spirit, I suppose.
Because listening to this, it seems like he made no effort at being practical or pragmatic with his ideology at all in terms of trying to concede a little bit of ground to...
No.
I mean, not just a little bit of ground to maybe the communists or to the environmentalists or the Democrats or anybody. He like concedes absolutely nothing.
Of course, he was the environmentalist. Everybody else was just fake.
But there's something kind of attractive about this where like you always want to sort of, some people want to please a person like this. They see it as a sort of challenge, and it becomes like a kind of aesthetic onto itself that appeals to a lot of people in the fact that it's so completely uncompromising.
Exactly.
I mean, one of the things that I started thinking about it, because I think it also fits with the Finnish temperament, is that I've played this roguelike game that you can get on stream. It's called Noita. That's from this Finnish development studio, Nolla Games. And it really is like a type of extremely like obtruse, difficult game that's just deliberately made to be as punishing as possible. But it very much like all of the names are in Finnish. It's all based on Finnish mythology, and it does not hold your hand in any way. It really tries to just punish you for every single thing that you do, even in good faith. But the game has a lot of fans who are kind of into that type of treatment. They want a type of challenge and to sort of bask in like this type of aesthetic, and that's kind of what I'm getting from him.
Yes, yeah, I think a strong-headed, assertive male, will inevitably attract women anyway. Now, if they stick around, I mean, that's another question.
It doesn't hurt that he's good looking as well.
Of course not.
Especially since he was of course, a romantic with the idyllic nature vision in his writing as well. So you could imagine some of these quite intelligent university girls, reading his polemics about this idyllic vision of the tiny villages in his ideal world and being completely smitten. But anyway, moving on. A special mention here for an event in Finnish history, Koijärvi-liike. So Koijärvi, Koi Lake, or what's the word for Koi? I'm not gonna, anyway. Koijärvi is a lake that's, well, it's basically not even a lake. It's half swamp, half lake, not really. The owners of this land wanted to drain the swamp and get some productive use out of it, be it farmland or whatever. But this sort of environment was especially one of the optimal places for bird life. And as an ornithologist, Linkola actively participated, and a political activist, actively tiraded against these private owners destroying one of these unique habitats in southern Finland. And here we get the sort of big environmentalists, Extinction Rebellion style, chaining yourself to the excavators going onto the site to dig ditches and preventing this. And it was a successful eco-activist stunt. And the area of Koijärvi Lake was then, after this move, protected by the state, although the protesters that chained themselves to the trees and the excavators did get heavy fines in the end. But
just a slap on the wrist, as they get these days when they do some kind of like Extinction Rebellion.
Back then, they did get extremely heavy fines, and a few of them did get some light jail time as well. But in the end, violence, actively going out there and putting your body in front of the excavator, challenging him to kill you, it did work, and they protected this natural habitat for posterity, and it still exists it's now under the protection of EU's Natura 2000 network, if people want to look it up.
Mm-hmm.
And this eco-activist stunt prompted the creation of the environment ministry in the Finnish cabinet, and it was also an organizational stepping stone for the Green movement, or the later Green Party in Finland. But I have to mention that Linkola was eventually kicked out by the future Green Party before it established itself as a formal party, for being much too radical for parliamentary things in 1988. So, next essay collection, Toisinajattelijan päiväkirjasta. Diary of a Dissident.
Precisely. The Diary of a Dissident.
The Diary of a Dissident.
Nice. Now we're getting into some stuff.
It was... he was, by this point, called the foremost dissident in Finland. Now, you could get into a position of, is he an acceptable dissident? And that is definitely a part of this, because he does hold these sort of lefty things, like environmentalism, and his history with pacifism. Although in this work, he does a very clean break from the pacifism. His history here has established himself as the foremost dissident in Finland in the eyes of the mainstream media. And this is why he titled this essay collection The Diary of a Dissident. And it is his worst selling book, because he directly advocates a lot of different terroristic activity. In the media, he is often called a juridivy by the nomenclatura of the time. Juridivy is a Slavic concept, being with the Soviet Union, having influences from there. It's basically a court jester or a court mystic in sort of a proto-Norse fashion, honestly. But people were trying to smear him as this sort of person who is kept around because he's quirky.
Okay.
In intellectual circles. So people can, if people can get my Russian pronunciation there, Yurodovy, they can look.
Yeah, I don't speak Russian, so I can't vouch for that.
That concept out. And he starts his tirade here in this Diary of the Dissident with just stating out directly for the first time that all humans are trash. Democracy is a religion of trash and a death and everything that is unbeautiful in the world.
Holy shit. That's a start.
Well, it's a constant theme through the book, not just a start. And he finally embraces his anti-Faustian position, and but he still has these faint traces of what you could call this contemporary thought zeitgeist, with his comparisons of industrial society to the Holocaust, and the public perceptions of these two events should be reversed. So people should think of the Holocaust like people think of industrial society, and industrial society like people think about the Holocaust.
I see.
And he ends
That's a very boomer truth of him.
Sure, but he still, I think this is again one of his more, he uses any argument to persuade people. And he didn't ever dispute any numbers, of course.
Right.
And the main message here being there simply are too many people using too many resources, and he starts on these many essays on how the actions of Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, none of these people went far enough. And one Uncle A also wasn't that bad really in the large picture of things, because with the large, before he talked about how industrial scale warfare damages nature, but then he revised this in the essay by saying, well, yeah, sure, the tank trammels the countryside, but the trees grow back eventually, and the human elements are very efficiently removed in this sort of warfare. So it doesn't matter really in the short run that there's damage.
Right. Okay. I suppose he gets away from it with that. Barely.
Yes. And he ends this essay collection with revising his former call for this temporary dictatorship, after which there was a supposed Rousseauian state of nature, and he now states an infinite dictatorship where humans do not deserve any freedom because they would just recreate industrial society with these Faustian instincts of ever wanting more, aspiring for more, and the humans.
So what does he want? Like a priest class that makes sure that no one has any, humans
deserve to be oppressed.
Yeah.
For the sake of being oppressed because they are bad.
Yeah, we need the ancient aliens to come back and enslave us so that we don't do anything too crazy.
Picking up on it, I'm almost sensing a bit of kind of anti-whiteness implicit in what he's saying there, because I think you could find other races of people who live more in communion with nature, as they say, or at least it's not as Faustian as the white civilizations.
Possibly. That I didn't really think of that actually, but yeah.
Like, because where I'm at, it's like if you're thinking like, okay, you're just going to recreate industrial society. Well, not if it's like a bunch of Africans. They're probably not going to do that. So, yeah, back to Africa theory.
Back to yeah. So
deport the environmentalists to Africa. Yeah.
Yeah. So after publishing a work of this sort and being still a somewhat public, people knew him, he had to hide from journalists that were farming quotes. He started guarding the road to his cabin with his gun out, because the journalists really just wanted to hear him, say the next outlandish thing.
Leo would approve, by the way. I think.
Indeed. Now, during this time, he also got a diagnosis with type 1 diabetes, which he lived with the rest of his life. He wrote some nice casual stories in his later works about how he biked around with a piece of, the circular rye bread with the hole in the middle, put through the bicycle, what do you call it in English? I'm blanking here. The thing you steer with on the bicycle.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway,
yeah.
he had a piece of circular rye bread with a hole in the middle going through there, and he kept on eating it slowly as he went. And yeah, but in the end, that wasn't enough, and he actually did get a car and a driving license at 50 years old. And this was interesting because a lot of his fans, a lot of them these idealistic university-aged women still, who just ignored the terrorism advocacy, of course.
Of course.
They refused to believe of him that he ever got a car, and continue to deny it to this day.
Nor then on with the savior, the handlebars of the the bike.
Brain
of
blanks
course.
out sometimes.
Yeah.
This duolingual.
Well,
stuff.
English isn't our native tongue, right? We can always lean on that.
Yeah, of course you can, but sometimes you don't remember something you finish, but
we refuse to completely immerse ourselves in the tyranny of the global American empire. That's what we're going with.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll use that. So he then also in 1986 included a proposal for the Green Party program, where he did this was the thing that got him kicked out of the Green movement proper before they got organized into a party in '88, because they just didn't see any way this stuff could, with the stuff about the personal cottages and the use of waterfront and stuff like that was still in there. So
right,
they couldn't see any way to get anything done parliamentarily.
He was getting a bit too hot for the press.
Well, not for the press. They loved it.
Well, I mean, for the PR people.
We're for the parliamentary party that they were trying to establish with the Green Party. So next, I kind of wanted to show the second video that I sent you about, and it is a speech he gave at the Green Party at a Green Party conference before they were organized as a formal party.
Let me see if I can pull this up. You want me to just play the video?
Yeah.
All right, let me know if you guys hear any of this.
Hyvää iltaa. Vihreä liike on pohtinut tavoiteohjelman tarpeellisuutta. Turkulaisten esitys liikkeen tavoiteohjelmaksi tyrmättiin yleisesti päivän puheenvuoroissa. Kokouksen väriläiskänä esiintyi kalastaja Pentti Linkola, jonka arvio vihreästä liikkeestä oli murskaava.
Illuusioton tilanneanalyysi ehkä osoittaa, että vihreän liikkeen tosiasiallisena toiveena ovat vetelehtivä yhdessäolo, loputtomat viisastelevat palaverit ja nokkela kirjoittelu Suomi-lehdessä. Vihreällä tulee ennen kaikkea olla hauskaa, kivaa, kliffaa. Mielenosoituskulkueeseen osallistutaan, jos reitin pituus on kohtuullinen ja sää poutainen. Puhetta torilla kuunnellaan, jos siinä on leikkimieltä ja huumoria. Ja sen jälkeen mennään jatkoille ja otetaan punkkupullot esiin. Uskonko minä, että tällainen vihreä liike, ihmiskunnan mutaatio, antaisi maailmalle jatkoaikaa? Minä en usko mitään, mutta tiedän, että niillä ja niillä edellytyksillä niin tapahtuisi. Vihreällä liikkeellä on yksi mahdollisuus miljoonasta. Kaikki muut liikkeet ajavat tuhoon kuin teuraat.
Suomen ainoan todellisen toisinajattelijan pessimismiin ei ole tietenkään pakko yhtyä. Täällä Turun helteessä Linkola pani kuitenkin vihreät ajattelemaan. Pikkumurheet järjestäytymisestä ja ohjelmista tuntuivat todella pieniltä. Onhan kyse eloon jäämisestä, kuten Linkola sanoi.
That's he shows up, calls them all retards and and softies, and then they give him gifts.
well, his devoted female fan base gives him.
Oh yes, of course.
The crown,
one of his 7 wives or something. Yeah. Also, one of the Thalmos couldn't help himself but comment on the journalist here with a bold comb over. That is all the way from downtown.
I mean, people in the past really knew how to do comb overs. It's almost something I'm nostalgic about. Like when you look at these old photos and stuff, they put like so much effort into them. You know, I mean, it still looks goofy as hell, but you can just appreciate how much time they must have put. You know, standing in front of the mirror every day.
He really tried. Yes.
Putting it in place. Yes.
Okay, but all in all, I would say a pretty based speech. I'm gonna hit the base button on this one.
Yeah, this is this kind of stuff that leaks out into the English language world of Linkola. Every time he says the base thing, it gets spread. But every time he says the cringe thing, you know, it doesn't get translated. So
of course,
yeah. So in the end, his appraisal of the Green Movement was that it was theory-obsessed nonsense, and they didn't really have what it takes to actually do what needs to be done.
Back in my day, we did a little bit of terrorism, yeah.
Well, he never actually did any terrorism. I have to mention that during that meeting right there, he actually raised a big scandal because he had, of course, published this book about, you know, advocating violence and terrorism. And a person during that speech did, you know, rise up from the front row. So somewhat notable person in the Green Movement probably rose up and started saying, you know, you can't say that, you know, we need to actually get stuff done, blah, blah, blah. And Linkola lightly tapped him on the forehead as if to, you know, say, get back down. And the tabloids were, of course, you know, filled with terrorist advocate starts mauling person at event.
Oh my God, yeah.
You could just imagine the sort of
the outrage, yeah.
Yeah. So we get to the second to last essay collection here, where he reiterates his advocacy for terrorism, but goes into more detail. And especially in the book published in 1989, the introduction to the thinking of the 1990s, he expunges upon why the terrorist actions must be taken, and not just what terroristic actions must be taken. And the reasons why are because human comfort is bad, because all human comfort, all things humans do to increase their comfort uses up resources, of course.
Of course.
And
so the less human resources you have, the better.
Yes, and human instincts are always wired for living in a deficiency. Human instincts always think that they are living in a deficiency, a lack of things, living on the edge, struggling for survival. So that is the way humans must be to use
Am I getting some hint of noble savage stuff here?
Well, that is always a theme in Linkola, less so in the later writings, but in his early stages, he definitely was of the noble savage idea, and I guess he never really got rid of them. But even though he had some things where we will, press the base button,
sure,
and more essays on about how the dictatorship, the dictatorship should be put forward, and he especially talks about how the older anyone gets, the wiser they become, and he especially advocates that a person who is 90 years old is more wise than a person who is 89 years old. Is his famous example in this book. And he's probably reflecting on himself and his pacifism here. At least that's what I garner from this. And it really gets into a sort of Platonic philosopher king, except you insert this principle of deep ecology in here. And he expounds upon how he does not care how man is oppressed, referring back to his previous essays about how Hitler, Stalin, all of these people, he doesn't really care about how people are oppressed as long as they are oppressed and as harshly as possible. And another theme is how tolerance and tolerating anything less than what is needed is the enemy, and people should always judge harshly and without hesitation.
I'm pressing the base button. But he does not, that he doesn't care how man is oppressed as long as he's oppressed as harshly as possible. That's a bit of an oof. There's a lot of doom and gloom here. It's not a positive vision, is it, that he's building up here?
This is a negative vision. It's not even a negative vision. It's
no. I was gonna say. I mean, positive, just as like it's not happy. It's very.
It's positive
very
for
much.
The birds.
Yes. But yes, it's also very negative in the sense that it's a negative vision. Clear them out, but he means literally everyone.
Getting from him. I mean, I'm getting almost like what he's doing is more of like an art project or a certain aesthetic taste rather than any type of coherent ideology that can never be implemented, because it seems to almost be designed to be counterintuitive in terms of how ideologies are supposed to work. It almost deliberately in such a way that you cannot ever build a coalition on this ideology ever, because it goes against what every single interest group wants and what every individual wants, and every kind of natural instinct is just defied. So like the universe would have to then just be, everything would have to be upside down for this to make sense, honestly. So it's really more left to a kind of metapolitical aesthetic taste that can kind of drip into literature and other type of cultures, and then maybe, covertly influence politics and so on.
Yes, and I think his legacy of eco-fascism is something that we might actually see. I'll just shut up about that.
A glow in the dark in the chat here says that I think his personality makes him based, but his education or philosophy makes him cringe. What do you think about that?
He directly rejected his own education, so I definitely wouldn't be that. I guess what he did fall in love with the idyllic nature of his childhood in the 30s, and he had this comment about how the journalists, of course, talked about how this is oppressive for humans and how could anyone tolerate this, and he said, I don't care how much, because this was about the 30s. He said that I wouldn't care about how much the fascists would round up the communists and beat them up and transport them over to the Soviet Union, over the eastern border, as long as, you know, there's less factories and beautiful nature and all that. And
so I see a comment in the chat here: you will have nothing and be happy, but implicit in his argument
and
is some...
even be happy.
Well, I feel like implicit in his argumentation here is some kind of freedom for the people who survive, right? The people who don't get culled in whatever eco meltdown he's looking for.
Well, maybe.
Or will they just suffer as well? Is that is he just negative all the way down?
Well, if we just return to the reactionary definition of deep ecology that I set out at the beginning, is that nature comes first, and if there is still room for humans afterwards, then some humans are fit for life. So it's a big if.
So
a very strange philosophy.
Did this guy ever do any work with like some native tribes or anything like this?
Well, he did travel, of course, all around Finland and in East Karelia and in the Soviet Union, but not really. I mean, he talked to people everywhere he went, but native tribes, not at all. And he hardly traveled at all after his experiences in Germany in his childhood.
Because that's like the last, in my view, like it sounds like he doesn't even want to work with actual native tribes. He just wants to have like this miserable dictatorship on top of everything. That where you just have like this kind of like stewards who will just maintain biodiversity at any cost, and at the cost of all of the humans that are left there. And like there's no joy in this at all. There's not like you can promise people a simpler life or anything, because it's not going to be simple. You'll still be subject to a bureaucracy and constrictions on freedom in every way.
Yes, basically, he directly advocated for the Green Party to actually establish a sort of, an SS corps of people who are tightly disciplined.
People with colored shirts, is that what you're saying?
Yes, and armbands, and people who should go around and make sure people consume less. Which might sound based in moderation. Consume less. Marvel movies might be a good thing, but consuming less raw eggs might not.
But did he have any kind of religion that he wanted to put on top of this? Because that's kind of the only way that I see that working out.
No,
where if you have
atheist.
Oh wow. Okay, then it's just. Like I said, it's just an aesthetic taste. Then it's just kind of dead in the water if you don't have any.
It's so weird because it's like, do you have a hunting license? But if you don't, I'm going to shoot you. And it's such a weird, roundabout, depressive philosophy.
He was directly institutionalized for depression twice. So
yeah, I suppose that makes sense.
Yeah.
See in the comments here, but Speedrunner says that would have loved to this guy today on YouTube. I think that would be great. Actually,
well, you can actually. There's actually a YouTube channel called Linkola Translations, and there's a few, I think a handful of 30-minute clips of Linkola going out fishing with journalists and stuff. You can go watch them to get a feel for the kind of person he was. In general, his work is always, this hyper aggressive, attacking humanity and hating humanity. But in person, he was a very likable person.
It's that meme picture from that one interview where he asks like, "Oh, your writing is so harsh, but in person you're very nice."
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he hated humanity, but he got along with anyone that he really just talked to. And as we saw from these couple of clips already, he was not a loud man, as if a Finn generally would be, but especially so even.
I mean, as a stereotypical Finn, we joke about, you all just sit in the woods and, drink vodka and be depressed. That's what you do. So He nails that stereotype. I'll give him that. I'm not sure if he was a big alcoholic, but
no, not really. He practiced as I mentioned, how he liked hymns because they are very disciplined music. He, of course, advocating these sorts of eco SS units going around, making people use less. He practiced this discipline himself, and he bragged about how low his electricity bill was from using one electrical light in his home in the middle of the woods sometimes.
I see. Okay.
So moving on. Yeah, so next we get to see the third and final video about immigration, our favorite subject.
Yeah, let's pull that one up. All right, let's go.
Antaa mennä. Ehkä juuri tämä menee joka tapauksessa. Kuvitellaan nyt vielä sitä pienten lasten jättäisuuden kustannuksia.
Kun sanotaan, että jossain Somaliassa ja Etiopiassa on jatkuva nälänhätä, niin pitääkö meidän antaa heidän niin kuin kuolla sinne vai?
No kyllä aivan varmasti. Ei se kuulu maapallon toisella puolella asuville ihmisille mitenkään. Yhtä vähän kuin joku suomalainen luonnon katastrofi kuuluu kellekään muulle kuin sille väestölle, joka sillä alueella asuu.
Niin, mutta eihän se tavallaan voi olla kuulumatta. He tuovat sen meidän rajoille tänne. Miten me voidaan siitä sulkea silmät, korvat?
No, miten voidaan? Paremmin kysyn mieluummin, että voidaanko sulkea silmät, tai pitääkö sulkea silmät? Suljetaan ne silmät ja korvat.
Tavallaan jos me annetaan heidän kuolla, me seurataan televisiosta heidän hidasta ja nopeaa kuolemaansa sinne.
Sekin on tarpeeton.
Seurata sitä televisiosta.
Niin.
Vaihdetaan vaan kanavaa ja katsotaan viihdettä.
Niin, ja taikka mä ajattelen televisiota tai muitakin aiheita, millä saa nämä lähetystunnit täyteen.
Että ei pidä edes katsella sitä, eikä edes olla tietävinään koko asiasta vai?
Niin, mihinkä hyvään se nyt johtaa sitten, että semmoisia ikäviä asioita katsella.
Niin. Tulee vaan mieleen se, että
se näytetään.
Jos me nyt sitten voidaan paremmin jäädä eloon niin kuin tavallaan antamalla heidän kuolla, niin eikö se kuitenkin tapa meistäkin sen ihmisyyden? Miten me voidaan täällä niin kuin se tietäen jatkaa niin kuin elävinä ajattelevina ihmisinä?
Jos me ajattelevina ihmisinä toimisimmekin, niin me taatusti annamme niiden kuolla, jotka ovat luonnonvaransa ehdyttäneet.
No, näetkö nyt, että siis tässä viime vuosina selvästi maailmanlaajuisesti yleinen henkinen ilmapiiri on kovasti koventunut. On tullut siirtolaisvastaisuutta, on tullut rasismia, kehitysapua ollaan entistä enemmän kritikoitu ja tavallaan muutenkin on sellainen yhteiskuntien sisäinen taistelu tuntuu kiihtyneen. Niin luuletko, että tämä on nyt sitä lopun alkua, tai onko se pudotuspeli nyt alkanut, jossa niin todella taistellaan niistä viimeisistä luista maailmanlaajuisesti?
Kyllä se varmaan on sitä esimakua sellaisesta. Ja tulevaisuushan tietysti on juuri sitä, että ei taistella enää ainoastaan luontoa vastaan ja luonnon varojen loppuun ammentamisen taistelua käydä, vaan sitten todella käydään taistelua myös ihmisten kesken ihmiskunnan sisällä.
Well, the chat has voted 73% in favor of based and 27% in favor of cringe to that clip.
It has the shades of this kind of Virgin Chad meme where you have like the crying Bojack journalist and the kind of
you
Chad.
Want to send them all home? Yes.
Yes, big chin. Well, what do you want to do? Just ignore it. Yeah, turn off the channel. I mean, it's I can see why the journalists love this guy. You could get a lot of good quotes from him and so on. And he is probably based in the sense that he just kind of does what he wants to do and doesn't care what anybody else thinks. But I voted no because I'm just generally opposed to this idea of just being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. Like, you have to, if you're going to pipe up about this stuff, you generally have to have some actual argument or something, unless you make that position just seem completely irrational in a sense, and that can be a problem.
Notice how in the video clip they're talking about refugee children dying, and they have little children in the background.
Yeah, they zoom in on the kid
I noticed that
as they're talking about it. Yeah, look at this little guy.
Doesn't help.
Yeah.
Yeah, he in his later life he went on to have these comments about how the Finns party leader, for example, once said that the migrant boats from over the Mediterranean from Libya to Italy should be, turned back and put back into the Libyan ports. But Linkola gave an interview where he just said, no, they shouldn't be turned back. They should be just sunk into the Mediterranean.
Well, yeah, it's at least he sets the standard on one end, so we can negotiate the position between these two things. Like, it's good to start the negotiation at it's like, nah, we just sink the boats.
Just sink it, yeah.
Yeah, Tony Abbott, stop the boats. Let's sink the boats. That's the Linkola line.
All right, we have half an hour left, just about. So,
and we have one last essay collection.
Yep.
Left, and it is Voisiko elämä voittaa ja millä ehdoilla? And actually, this last book, published in Finnish in 2004, is translated by Arctos Media.
So you can get this in English.
Absolutely, and it is under the title "Can Life Prevail?" The original title contained the subtitle of "And with What Conditions."
Arctos is the guys who have done the beautiful Evola books, the Red series.
Yeah.
I really like those.
They're based in Budapest, and it was the English was published in 2011. He has 3 major parts in this last collection, and it's mostly collated first about generally trees, forest coverage in Finland, and he has these several essays about how statisticians keep on lying about the quality of the forests. There's this big argument. I think I've actually myself repeated this, that forest coverage in Finland right now is the greatest it has been in hundreds of years, because back in the day with the hack and slash style of farming, that's when the bottoming out of forest coverage was. But Linkola spent all his life going through Finnish and Karelian, Soviet, Russian forests, and he always, before he went to a new area, looked up the stats on how much forest there should be, what quality, how thick should the average tree be, etc. And he every time found extreme overestimations in the statistics. And all the secondary literature talks about how, he's arguing against the stats, bro. He's completely wrong. He's just preaching to. It's just complete nonsense.
Based.
And as I mentioned, I've fallen myself into this argument before. And
of arguing for the reign of quantity. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, arguing for the logging industry interests, and Linkola goes directly into this, how the reason why he speculates that these stats are so skewed is because they want to coerce individual Finnish forest owners, because there are a lot of people that still own small patches of forests all over the place. and the way to coerce,
same in Norway.
The way to coerce them to sell them to big companies is to say, look how much forest there is. There's more forest than ever before, so your forest land here is cheap, and you should sell it to us while it still has what it's got, because it's only getting cheaper, because look how much we're planting and stuff.
Right.
So, that makes sense as an argument for me, but, the counter argument I found through the secondary literature much, much weaker.
Right.
So, yeah, the second portion of this essay collection is mostly about animal habitats and how they get shrunk every time there's a bridge over some lake here or there over the thousands, and how these we build these gigantic halls to play ice hockey in the summer and gigantic halls to play football in the winter in, and how this is all very, very completely stupid.
Yeah, it's backwards, and it's grandiose and probably hubris of mankind.
Yeah. And well, I should also mention at this point, I forgot in the previous, that in 1995 he founded the Natural Heritage Foundation, and this foundation, with what wealth he had and what donations he could get, would devote all its wealth to buying up forest land, especially in southern Finland where it's more scarce, and completely pacifying it, meaning there is no human intervention in the forest, no clearing of fallen down trees or anything.
So it's just being owned as just untouched land, basically.
Yes. And this Natural Heritage Foundation continues to this day doing that very same thing, just buying up and conserving as much forest as possible. And but my general argument against this is, for how many ever 1,000 years, at least 3,000 years, people have been going through these forests, and even sustainably, using up what they could get out of them, building, whatever stick fences and, clearing out the forests, making sure it isn't completely festering with all kinds of rotting material, and, making use of whatever falls down already. It just makes sense that you don't chop the tree when you could, just take the one that's fallen down in the storm already and use that. So I really don't get this complete conservation of no human activity. The Natural Heritage Foundation continues to fight against the jokamiehenoikeudet. So, I don't know Norwegian, but allemanretten. So every man's rights of people to go pick berries and whatever, and roam. They fight against people actually even walking in these areas, even though that's actually one of the things that's a very sort of sacred thing to Nordics in general.
Yeah, that's one of the first things that were established when Norway gained its independence was the safety of our forests and the rights of everyone here to be free to venture into them, basically.
Yeah, I think the best translation in English is the right to roam. Meaning,
yes, the right to roam. That's a good way of putting it.
Meaning, even if you own a private road in the Nordics, anyone has still the right to walk at least a private road, maybe not the private property, if it's not fenced. Yeah. So, whereas in, say, the Anglosphere, the private property thing is more absolute, including private roads.
But so, there are some restrictions on it, but I mean, we're getting into specifics here, so let's just keep going.
Yeah, so the second part the first part in this last essay collection was about forest and forest coverage. The second part about animals and animal habitat shrinking, and he especially has this tirade against cats and house cats in particular, and how they are complete vermin that eat everything that birds should eat, and they also eat the birds, of course, and kill the birds. And he basically advocates cat genocide, and is disliked by every ancient Egyptian out there.
Because they damage the ecology around them, is that it?
Yeah.
So he does privilege certain animals, I guess, over others.
Well,
or,
this is with the foreign species again, I guess.
Oh.
So the
because the
domesticated
cat
house
is imported.
cats. Yeah, it's the domesticated house cats they're not.
The bobcat is good. The house cat is bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. The bobcat, the lynx is good. The house cat is not. And as such, he also has a special essay on minks farming, because minks are from North America and not indigenous to Eurasia. And
I like how he has a tendency to sort of land on the same place as a lot of dissident right people, but for like the totally different reasons.
Exactly. That's one of the key themes.
Yeah.
Key themes that I want to get through with the stream, that people have this perception of Linkola outside in the Anglosphere or English-speaking world, that he's this uber-based reactionary, whereas he has a lot more in common with what the earlier comments said about this warped communist thing, or I guess not communist, but I guess warped Rousseauian thing.
Yeah, so, Rousseauian is a good way of putting it.
Yeah. He has a special new take here about how doctors should just quit en masse, and state debt is also solved by not paying doctor salaries.
Holy shit. Yeah. Solved it, guys. Just quit and we're good.
Yeah, he's developing new solutions constantly for this reduction in population in a more humane way, I guess. And he has this kind of funny essay about vegetarianism and veganism in the modern day. This essay was written, I think, at the turn of the millennium, where he applauds all vegans for their the principle, of course, of not wanting to harm animals. But then he turns around and attacks them, because the main way vegans get their tofu lattes is because huge monocultures get developed from bulldozing forest land and animal habitats and industrial farming.
Nice. Yep.
So he does this bait and switch with these people, and I approve. And he especially when he advocates for milk, and how milk is the greatest food of all. I especially,
he's right, though.
I especially approve of this.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I want to say the next sentence here about the UN.
Yeah, I see it in your notes here.
Yeah.
The UN should redact the biggest population centers, is what it says.
With radioactive material.
Yes.
And he especially advocates for the global organization of the UN to do this, as the Platonic philosopher kings that should reduce the population in this fashion and take the blame for all humanity. He called China's one-child policy the most significant thing humans have ever done to address the problems of the modern day. He wouldn't probably advocate that China actually backpedaled on that, and they're actually thinking of forcing people to to breed now.
Yeah,
but
they're switching on that. Yeah.
Yeah, they are more pure managerial, whereas Linkola is he uses managerialism as a complete
as a tool. Yeah.
Yes, it's just a tool.
A means to an end.
And he calls men completely stupid and simply, nihilistic and having no ideals, and this sort of completely. This is the problem. Usually I read intellectual topics in English, so I can translate it immediately from my written notes here, but it's kind of hard to do it live from Finnish. But essentially he calls men stupid because of their complete ambivalence to these natural phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
But he calls women evil fundamentally because of their protective instinct towards humans.
Interesting. So this is one of those cases too where it's like he falls on the same side as a lot of people on the dissident right, but for a different reason than everyone else.
He notices the same trends of how humanity
how black-pilled can one guy get? Seriously.
Humanity is at a fallen state, but there is no salvation. There is nothing. We must just.
But I mean, there's nothing we can do. But if we died quicker, that would be nice.
I guess he coined the idea of Homo incipiens.
Homo incipiens. All right.
Yes, but he did have at the in this last essay book somewhat instinctive. He didn't use the proper terms Pareto and these people use, but he had this clear idea of how this revolution he proposed to save the environment would happen, and it is very elite theory pilled. It understands fundamentally that a very tightly and very well organized fanatic minority on any issue can achieve anything.
Right.
And this is exactly what he calls for to save the environment. And this sort of thinking is
so he
definitely
understands very well the sort of power dynamic rules, I guess.
Yes, he fundamentally understands this extremely well, and it is shown at in the third section of this book, where it goes into the state of the world and what must be done. Can life prevail, as the title says? And by life, he doesn't mean human life.
Of course.
In his later interviews and writings as an old man, we're talking, after the turn of the millennium, 2005 to when he died, 2020. In interviews, he continued to give the journalist the quotes he wanted, saying every terrorist strike is meaningless compared to the wars waged by nations. But actually, those wars aren't bad either. But when the rubber hit the road, and for example, in 2007 and 2008, there were a couple of Finnish school shooters, copycats of the Americans. And they often wore T-shirts with slogans about how humans are a complete waste product and stuff like. They had Linkola in their manifestos essentially, and he completely just ignored journalists when they went for comment about this, and not on the abstract level of general terrorist advocacy. And right. not when it actually happened, and deranged kids went up and shot schools with manifestos with his work cited. He wrote short pieces about celebrating 9/11, the Madrid bombings, and all kinds of these things, the truck attacks also. He said that this was all okay, less people. And he only lamented that people like Osama bin Laden weren't ready to go as far as he wanted in removing more people.
Yeah, he's pro-terrorism, or, he's just pro-death, this guy, right?
Well, he's just anti-human, as established. But there are specks of light, as in he opposed in 2010 a campaign in Helsinki called Porn for Bibles, where people would turn in the Bibles dusting on their shelves, and they would receive porn from the organizers.
Really?
Yes, and the Bibles would be disposed ecologically, of course, recycled, the paper. But Linkola fundamentally opposed this for, I don't know, sort of these contrarian reasons, I guess. And the same happened when the politician Päivi Räsänen, it was in 2012 initially, when she was a Christian party, a prominent politician, and she simply quoted the Bible saying about, a man and a woman, Adam and Eve, if not Adam and Steve. And she got the rainbow flag people in 2012 after her, and that court case was actually resolved in 2021, just now after Linkola's death. But in protest against the rainbow lobby attacking Päivi Räsänen, he rejoined the evangelical Finnish Lutheran state church, just to, because it was trendy to leave the church. He now joined it, even though he fundamentally still stated that he was an atheist.
I mean, the personality of this guy, too, is just, he's noticed that things have gone horribly wrong, and he's just trying to oppose it in any way he can, and aims to be as contrarian to whatever the status quo is as possible, I guess.
Sure. Although,
that has to be part of it, right?
It most certainly is, but he does have a higher principle at the end of it. Although that higher principle isn't again.
But the higher principle is I'm against everything and anything. So, that allows him quite a bit of wiggle room, right?
Well, he isn't against everything, but he's against so many things that are relevant to humans, because he is, again, yeah.
Yeah, but what isn't relevant to everything is from a human perspective because you are a human, so everything is relevant to a human in a sense. Right?
The number of birds aren't.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? Because he says that, well, what if you didn't exist? So within the realm of humans, he can basically take any position he wants, because his ultimate position is outside of the realm of humanity.
He doesn't have to have any consistency in the realm of humans.
Yes, exactly.
And people kept on calling him a hypocrite until the end, but he didn't care
it's
because
the Lorax, says Colchius.
So in his later years, he really loved this fiery little girl called Greta Thunberg.
Oh, Jesus.
He enjoyed her spirit and stated so multiple times. Although when she stated for the climate refugees, he started backpedaling and said, sink the boats again. So he didn't like that part, but in general, he had advocated and endorsed Thunberg.
Right.
And at the main message she gave.
He liked the idea. He didn't like who was pulling the strings.
He didn't like the praxis.
Yeah.
And I don't think he was pretty old at this point, so I don't think he even bothered.
Imagine you're a Linkola, though, like living your life as a 90-year-old in the woods, and some journalist rolls up and shows you a clip of Greta Thunberg and asks you what you think. What are you going to say, right? Like, exactly. She seems to care about the environment. That sounds nice, right?
Yeah. So he stand for Thunberg, as Winkle mentioned, and he kept, as most of these predictors of doom say he kept on revising the dates he mentioned, but I mean, these terminal predictions of collapse, I guess, are the wrong prediction. I mean, I think we've pretty well established in the sphere that the collapse is utopian. it's a long decline. It's a decline, and it's
certainly the regime we live under this in the current moment is more than happy to ride the decline rather than a collapse, right?
Yeah. So that's also a thing the journalist likes to pester him about, was these predictions, because they like the gotchas. And the last thing that happened in his life of note I have here is that one Theodore Kaczynski.
Yeah, can I pull up an image here?
Sure.
Just, I know you're gonna say it, but I just want to share this with the chat in this way. And then they can hit the bass or the cringe button.
Well, I mean, Kaczynski is like positively like a humanist compared to this guy.
Yeah, right? you should have included the line right below this one.
Oh shit! Sorry, I'll pull that up too. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool chickens, based and cringe.
I mean, that's Linkola. Apparently, we've figured that much out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Kaczynski was a deep ecologist, as far as I knew. No. He was just more of a Luddite or sort of anti-tech from a human perspective.
Yes, and I think Kaczynski did what he did because he fundamentally believed that humans in the anprim mode, so to speak, is best for humans. And he wanted the best for humanity, which was, these hunter-gatherer tribes, basically.
Monofatalmo says at this point it's just autism beyond any based cringe. I have transcended based and cringe.
Yeah, so what's left, I guess, is this conclusion I have. A lot of the things here I've basically talked about. I guess I should mention his romantic vision of the neo-feudal. Yes, right here, this is a huge picture in the local newspaper the day he died. This is my parents' copy of the newspaper, a picture taken by me. And the title here is, "If I Only Heard the Birds Still Singing." So you can see the journalist romanticizing about his ideals.
Yeah.
Evermore.
There's also this thing you sent me, which is like, they sent him like 10 questions of like random stuff that was published apparently after he died. Is that it? No,
no, it was published. Oh yeah, now I remember this. Yeah, I think this was in the 70s or something. No. Actually, this was in the early 2000s.
Here it says originally published. Yeah, in December 5th, 2007.
Yeah.
So what would you like in December 7th as your 75th birthday present? And the answer is, all possible rememberings should be directed at the Finnish Natural Heritage Foundation. If you were a bird, which species would you be? Lesser black-backed gull. I would spend winters in the Lake Victoria or in the Red Sea, summers in the most beautiful islets of Finland. The most important characteristic of civilization, the consideration of other people. Did you meet Heinrich?
I want to just comment here. He's still trying to sell his message to people.
He is. Did you meet Heinrich Himmler in 1942? No, he was visiting my great uncle. How big is your electricity bill? 16 euros from 2 months. So, all of you guys paying to socket to Putler right now, you could be living on 16 euros or 8 a month. Your proposal as the most useless item of the year, the advertising pages of the Helsingin Sanomat. Did we cover these in the Finland overview?
was the Nordic media stream where we saw the big pride flag from.
I was going to say, is this the pride flag newspaper?
Yes.
Nice.
It's the biggest newspaper. Yes.
How does Linkola appreciate rock and roll? I can't even begin to fathom that music. The liver casserole with raisins or without, both are fine. There we go. I'll go back to this one, and you can talk about your conclusions here after. It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride, hasn't it? This guy's views.
Definitely. I think I tried to give people a bit of a forewarning about he's not really an eco-fascist. I mean, sort of. Yes, I guess if you define fascist in the way the left does, meaning repression, then yes, he's a fascist. But no, not really. And
only in the managerial sense, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
But even then, as we discussed, it seems more to be a means than an end, right?
Yeah, I guess the good is the good distillation of everything he stood for could be found in a 2021 tweet by Green Party politician Touko Aalto. That is linked right there, and yep, be able to? I'll just translate live. So the only sustainable system is the ecosystem. If it crashes, everything crashes. When we are speaking purely from the perspective of the ecosystem, of the usefulness of different kinds of species, the most useless species of all, being humans, threatens all other life on this planet, and through that itself.
Yeah, he's certainly drawing from Linkola there, it feels.
This is the central message of Linkola. And Touko Aalto is in parliament right now, although what he actually votes for is rights for women and stuff. So
well, yeah. I mean, that's just standard Green Party stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. he can tweet all this stuff he wants. Linkola would like to see some action. And this romantic vision he had, I guess, could be inspired from this the first novel ever wrote in the Finnish language by Aleksis Kivi, or Aleksis Stenvall, as he was originally known before he changed his name or Finnicized his name, being the Seven Brothers of Impivaara. And this is this huge description of how these seven brothers, it's a growing up story of them trying to survive out in the wilderness when they're left with their family farm when their parents aren't there. And
right.
The descriptions of survival and the nature there is probably what a lot of people see Linkola's vision as also. I guess with the last contradictions, humans should be used to uphold biodiversity, which should never decline without humans.
What?
Exactly. This is a fundamental contradiction in his thinking.
Yeah. Humans
should be used to uphold biodiversity, which should never decline without humans. I just see that as a well, if we just even in a pure Darwinistic frame, it's still wrong. But in the end, his stated goal was never about anything like raising awareness or being an intellectual or being consistent about anything. He only cared about saving as much nature, the world, as possible. Anything man does to man is irrelevant in the long run. Any philosophy, any way of thinking, any political movement, religion that is anthropocentric is useless.
Right. And then you have a quote here, which I really liked, because actually I pulled up Knut Hamsun earlier, but this is something he could have written, which is what I find very interesting. It sounds like something he would have written.
Yes, I think.
But he wasn't anywhere near as as an ecologist, more of a traditionalist, I suppose.
Yeah, Pentti Linkola, the way he tried to rationalize humans to exist in his framework was basically to have humans throw away industrial society and use axes instead of chainsaws and everything like that. Much labor was available back then, as it is still today, even if we were to cut down trees with knives. Machines, however, were already looming upon us, and were soon destined to strike at the heart of the wilderness, and elsewhere as well, depriving man of all he deserved: mighty labor, effort, and struggle. Reading this line in both English and Finnish struck me, and I think this is where I first thought. I first read this in Finnish in I think it was March, and then in English later this month, when I went through the book again in English, since there was an English. And I fundamentally think that I've started to understand Linkola and why I shouldn't have gone through with the stream and translating work into different languages.
Right.
Because there fundamentally is something about how language expresses the racial soul. Mm-hmm. And this grandiose statement in English, you could imagine some Luddite activist screaming on top of his New England town square soapbox about this.
Yeah, but
whereas the statement is in Finnish,
right?
And you imagine Linkola's stoic, solemn, soft-spoken face. It's something completely different.
And the imagery it conjures is very different as well when you think of it in the context of a Nord. The labor, effort, and struggle is much more. It's not this huge, project. It's your own patch of land, clearing the forests, etc. Right?
Yes, and this is why I just fundamentally agree with this idea of not. I've started to agree with this idea of not translating it. I guess it's still, I have some lingering doubts about this since I went through with the stream, but yeah. I just wanted to throw this last point of my own at the end here.
To Vingel in the chat here, we have talked about the refugee boats, yes. Maybe not specifically the thing you're mentioning. I'm not going to pull it up, because that might get us targeted.
Much more than just this hand thing. Not just the hand.
I don't know. Is there any questions? Is there anything you want to add to the end? I mean, we're touching 3+ hours here, and
no, I hope this presentation has shown that when you see someone translated from somewhere else in the world to English, and you see the based clips of someone, and he's this uber reactionary, think twice.
Yeah, that's a good sentiment. Although there has been a lot of things where we, press the based button throughout the stream. It's I still think the fundamental route he takes to get there is questionable, to say the least. What do you think, Luddic?
Yeah, before coming into the stream, I never used him to argue any points, and I'll probably continue to not use him to argue points after this stream. But I'm still glad that I know about him now. It seems like a sort of very funny, interesting character who you could read and just kind of bask in the sort of uniqueness and the the sort of contrarianness of this personality.
The base schizo hold every
well, I
position.
look at it more as like an artist almost.
Yeah,
people like this, I look at what they're doing as like more of like an art project rather than a political movement.
I can see that.
Because it seems like the logic of this guy, like everything he does seems to defy political logic. It's almost beyond good and evil. At this point, there's just no thought for pragmatism at all. It's just purely contrarianism for the sake of being contrarian. And I mean, there's something really interesting about it, where you would get a lot of joy in reading what his takes about stuff. And I mean, the idea of having nature preserves and protected land and so on. I'm on board with that, actually. So there is something of value to get there, but in terms of trying to implement any of his ideas into a political movement, or whether the dissident right should try to adopt stuff from this guy, it's just a blanket no for me on every point.
Yeah, I'd agree. He ends up at a lot of things that sounds like they fit into stuff we talk about, but if the core is different and if the core is wrong, then it's not going to lead anywhere. So it's just you get to press like and write based in the comments on the images, but that's where the fun ends, right?
Well, actually, thinking about it, I mean, a part of the dissident right, as the movement exists, will certainly be in preserving people like this guy, right? And like trying to preserve the memory of this guy and having him represented on his own terms, not being co-opted by, stupid green movements and so on, and just trying to like this was a based guy who existed on his own terms with his own values, and that should be allowed to stay. Like he wants to protect nature. I want to protect thinkers like him, from this kind of progressive, like retarded revisionism and stuff.
And that being said, I'd we can disagree with him, but I still would say after this that I respect him, right? If nothing else, he seemed to go hard. I guess is what the kids say.
He never budged, and especially the fundamental idea of this fanatic, religiously fanatic minority that has to achieve something, and this absolute principle in not tolerating something is something that we can harness. And if someone
that is very true,
if someone wants I don't have problems with if someone wants some material, they can just come ask me in the Matrix, and I can provide some of the translated
the Matrix is linked down below if anyone is interested in joining the Longhouse room, and there you can get in touch with the
last essay book. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Birkarl, for illuminating us and doing all of this nice Finnish research. And next week we will probably be streaming on Thursday, and it's probably going to be a bit of a grab bag of topics, more of a hangout. There's a few more guests than usual, and we're probably going to talk a bit about what those of us who are going to the Witten will learn about the logos versus praxis, without, of course, spoiling anything that happens there. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week.